built. Infamous as a terrifying Tudor prison, and renowned as the home of the crown jewels, the Tower of London. The White Tower is the most recognizable castle keep in the world.
At the time, nothing of this scale had been built in Britain since the Romans.
William's White Tower in London was completely different because it was made of stone that was imported from Normandy. And he built it in that part of the River Thames to dominate the people of London, to say, I am your new king.
If you're sailing up the Thames, coming to London for the first time, bang, there it is. Just to say, I'm in charge, I am all powerful.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner! Here we go.
Excellent. Sorry for this one. Yeah, I saw you guys out there.
You need some help?
Your tow chains are a little loose. Could spark a wildfire. I could show you how to secure them properly if you'd like.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Anytime. You should check out SmokeyBear.com. They've got a bunch of tips on wildfire prevention.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
I'm a United States Marine. Being a veteran, you don't want to show any weakness, so it becomes really hard for you to ask for anything. Every veteran is deserving the benefits they earned by serving our country.
The tower was a high-security base for the royal family and their military entourage.
The White Tower had a very key feature, and that is that the entrance was on the first story, so you couldn't get in at ground level. It was built with immense walls. It was completely impregnable.
Unlike a typical royal palace complex spread across a number of buildings, here, for security reasons, the meeting hall, chapel, and bedrooms are all stacked on top of one another in a high-rise design. William was never to see the tower in its full glory. It wasn't completed until 1100, 13 years after his death. But his fortress would play a central role in British history, a place notorious for murder and mystery. Two of Henry VIII's wives were executed at the tower, and Guy Fawkes was imprisoned here following his attempt to blow up Parliament. Richard III reputedly had his two young nephews murdered and their bodies hidden behind a wall. And in 1861, a thief tried to steal the crown jewels. For centuries, the tower has stood on the banks of the Thames as a potent symbol. Today, the super-rich and the powerful continue to use tall or grand buildings to impress. Built to honor the Kim dynasty, North Korea's Rungrado Stadium is the largest on Earth. For centuries, countries have competed for the prestige of having the tallest building in the world. Upon completion in 2010, the Burj Khalifa seized the crown for the United Arab Emirates, standing a whopping 2,716.5 feet high. And there are those with a few $1 billion to spare who choose to build their own towers. Back in medieval England, William the Conqueror's stone tower was the first of its kind. But subsequently, a vast building project would take the concept of the castle and castle engineering to a whole new level. Rochester Castle stands on the banks of the River Medway in the English county of Kent. It was designed with some radical engineering innovations to be ready for any attack, foreign or domestic. Traces of damage inflicted by enemies are still visible on the fabric of the castle today. But they weren't left by invading forces, rather a homegrown assault.
The design of Rochester is unique for two very important reasons. The first is that it's the first tower in the country to be built on 4 stories, so it's much taller than any other tower that's been built. And secondly is the construction of a forecastle.
The forecastle is designed to protect a castle's entranceway.
In any fortification, the weak point is always going to be the entrance.
At Rochester, a large stone extension houses a giant waiting room and, crucially, conceals the main gate from attack. Any assault would now involve an extended approach that could only be made on foot. An attacking force would be helplessly exposed.
And the way it is engineered is specifically to defend with the fewest number of people against the maximum numbers of attackers.
Entrance security is still evolving today. There are countless ways to keep a door shut. And the world's most famous vault is at Fort Knox. Fort Knox in Kentucky is home to the United States Bullion Depository. It stores the country's precious metal reserves, including over 4,000 tons of gold.
The expression, "it's like trying to get into Fort Knox," implies a really high level of security. And certainly in the case of Fort Knox, what we're talking about is somewhere that's nearly impossible to access.
Fort Knox can only be entered after negotiating 4 perimeter fences, armed guards, and a state-of-the-art electronic security system. The building itself is seemingly impregnable. It's made of concrete-lined granite and reinforced steel, enabling it to withstand attack. And just in case, digital technology presents a final barrier.
The security codes are shared amongst a number of people to make it really difficult to access this building.
So far, at least, no one has ever come close to breaking in. For over 100 years, Rochester Castle was considered equally impregnable. But in 1215, a group of rebels attempted to seize control of this key military stronghold. At that time, it presented a major threat to the ruler of England, King John. He ordered a siege.
John is determined to break into this gargantuan castle, so he throws everything he can at it for 7 weeks.
So what kind of weapons were at King John's disposal? If you want to smash your way into a building, you might think the easiest way is through the front door. Giant battering rams had been developed in ancient times. The Assyrians had sophisticated rams as early as the 9th century BC.
Battering ram is quite an interesting piece of technology. The idea is that when you put a large force into a small area, you get a very high pressure out of it.
In theory, such intense pressure would puncture the toughest of barriers. But the entrance to Rochester Castle was up on the first floor, protected by the forecastle, heavy doors, and a portcullis, making it impossible to maneuver a large battering ram anywhere near the gate. So King John ordered the deployment of a new weapon to break the siege. the trebuchet.
The engineering principles behind the trebuchet are exactly the same as you would imagine a catapult.
A trebuchet uses the energy of a falling counterweight to launch a projectile, such as a large rock contained in a sling attached to a lever arm. The counterweight is hoisted into the air and cocked with a pin. Once the pin is removed, the counterweight immediately drops and the lever arm sharply rotates, throwing the rock hundreds of feet through the air towards its target.
For decades, I've taught you everything I know. How to safely build a fire. How to control the flames. What to do with hot coals. How to secure your chains. But I can only teach wildfire prevention. Only you can prevent wildfires.
Hedy Lamarr was sitting at a piano next to George Antile. They were creating something with the potential to change the course of the world.
Sea slugs.
Coffee. Ketamine.
Sexual pleasure.
Cuteness.
Food. Kelp Forest. Woodstock. Baseball.
Tennis.
Firefighting. Super subs.
Fast radio bursts. Solar sailing.
This high-tech medieval weapon was engineered to inflict maximum damage, and King John had sent 5 of them to the siege of Rochester Castle.
Those hiding inside castle walls might have felt pretty safe until their combatants on the opposite side brought up their heavy artillery.
So he's hurling great rocks, carved balls of stone, at the castle, trying to smash his way in. These 5 machines didn't cease in their barrage day and night.
Despite being the most advanced weapons of their day, the king's trebuchets failed to dent Rochester's mighty stone walls, or the rebels' resolve. The siege continued. In the modern world, the search for new weapons is still a never-ending technological arms race. Each new weapon is counteracted by a new form of defense, which in turn creates a demand for more powerful attacking technology. Today, as ever deeper and more ambitious subterranean command centers are constructed, a new generation of weaponry has been developed to reach them.
Known as bunker busters, these are bombs which can penetrate deep into the earth or right through dozens of feet of reinforced concrete before exploding and causing absolute devastation.
At the 13th century siege of Rochester Castle, going underground was now King John's only option. His tactics would expose a weakness in castle design that even stone construction couldn't address.
The only way John is in the end able to sort of get into that building is to undermine it, which is to say to dig a tunnel under one corner.
Then, when the tunnel had been dug right under the wall, they would set fire to that timber and the wall would collapse.
It caused a good proportion of the keep to come crashing to the ground.
The way they use fire to undermine structures is by basically destroying the foundation that the structure is built upon. And once the foundation is gone and you get a weak point in the structure, then the structure has no substance to stand on.
Amazingly, even after the collapse of the southeast corner of the keep, the rebels fought on.
In the end, it's hunger that does for them. It's hunger that induces them to eventually surrender to King John.
The fall of Rochester proved that the new generation of stone castles were not yet invulnerable. Medieval engineers had their work cut out if they were to defend against tunnelers. And tunneling has remained a military tactic right up to the 20th century. Playing a role in some of the bloodiest military campaigns of the modern era. During the Second World War, Japanese soldiers used tunnels on the Pacific island of Iwo Jima, constructing miles of hidden passageways to defend against or attack American forces. Tunnels were also used to great effect during the Vietnam War of the 1960s and 70s.
Viet Cong built a huge network of tunnels, about 20 feet below ground. These tunnels would allow soldiers to travel for miles to conduct surveillance, to set traps, or to launch surprise attacks.
After which, they could disappear underground to safety. Tunneling is a tried and tested, dirty trick of war. And the undermining of Rochester Castle proved a valuable lesson to medieval engineers. When they came to rebuild the fortress, they introduced a radical new feature.
The square tower at Rochester was replaced by a round tower.
Circular towers are structurally stronger than square towers. They have less points of weakness.
When a projectile hits the corner or edge of a square tower, it can easily bring it down. But if it hits a circular tower, it's more likely to be harmlessly deflected. Circular towers of various kinds proved a game-changing advance for castle security. And the advantages weren't only structural. From a surveillance perspective, round towers gave bowmen a far wider field of vision, eradicating watchtower blind spots created by the 90-degree corners of square towers.
For decades, I've taught you everything I know. How to safely build a fire, and how to control the flames. But I can only teach wildfire prevention. Only you can prevent wildfires.
Wait, use the shovel and bucket of water, remember? Drown, stir, drown, feel.
Where'd you learn that?
SmokeyBear.com. Don't want to start a wildfire, right?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
We got patents for long-lost inventions and bring them back to life. Oh! That was unbelievable! We free the monster!
What if we could live entirely digitally? The answer to that question starts with breakthroughs built on centuries of connected ideas and innovations.
Today, the curved wall is used by architects to design and build some of the most elaborate and jaw-dropping buildings in the world. Liberation from the rectangular forms that traditionally dominated cityscapes.
The absolute world tower in Canada, where you've got these amazing curved towers, and the taller one is actually nicknamed Marilyn Monroe for its sort of iconic hourglass figure.
Guggenheim Bilbao is one of the great buildings of the late 20th century, and it's a building that looks utterly impossible. It's architects wanting to explore not just the possibility of building circular buildings, but of completely defying this square box and building things that look utterly unbuildable.
By the time Rochester got its round tower, other elements of castle engineering were also improving, with lessons learned far from the battlefields of England and Wales. From its 7th century emergence in the Middle East, the Islamic faith spread far and wide, east towards India, into northern Africa, and up into southwest Europe. By the 11th century, knights from Europe were embarking on crusades to recover the Holy Land from Islamic rule. Here they'd build new fortresses on a massive scale. One of the most powerful of these Crusader castles can still be found 25 miles west of the city of Homs in Syria, near the Lebanese border. KORD-KBWI.
Crac de Chevalier was unique because it's one of the earliest examples of a concentric castle, which means that the castle sits within its own curtain wall.
Concentric castles consisted of an outer circuit wall with built-in round towers and an inner wall built higher with additional towers.
The idea is that that inner wall can protect and defend the top of the outer wall, and that these two walls are broadly parallel.
With the concentric layout, defenders could protect the outer perimeter from attack and then fall back, if need be, into the center of the castle. The wall within the wall at Crac was highly influential, and not just in the medieval world. The concept has been endlessly reused to keep people out, and sometimes to keep people in, right up to modern times. During the Cold War, in the second half of the 20th century, control of Europe was divided between NATO in the west and the Warsaw Pact in the east. Berlin in Germany was initially shared between the two blocs. But in August 1961, in just 2 weeks, East German forces erected a makeshift barbed wire and concrete block wall, dividing one side of the city from the other. The Berlin Wall. Over the following months and years, the wall was further reinforced.
The Berlin Wall was actually constructed of 2 walls, with an area in between that was filled with watchtowers, anti-vehicle trenches, guard dog runs. In effect, it was a killing zone, much like we might say the area between the concentric walls of a medieval castle.
The medieval castle, Crac de Chevalier, also had some defensive tricks up its sleeve.
So half the battle's won when you're creating an impregnable fortress if you stick it up on a nice rocky outcrop.
Over 2,000 feet high, surrounded by steep inclines, the landscape gave this castle a defensive head start. Any approach would leave an attacker dangerously exposed.
Crac de Chevalier also has a very distinctive entranceway. It's called a bent entrance, in which anyone entering the castle is essentially funneled into a bottleneck, making them very vulnerable to attack.
Although it survived many assaults and sieges, the castle eventually fell in 1271, and the last of its Crusader knights either surrendered or were killed. Despite Crac's ultimate defeat, advantageous geography can boost security. Used effectively, it will deter most would-be attackers. There are some astonishing later examples, including the Prajama Castle in Slovenia, built in the mouth of a cave. Mont Saint-Michel, built on a tidal island in northern France. And Trotsky Castle in Bohemia, constructed on a hilltop surrounded by forest. Unsurprisingly, engineering ideas from the Crusader Wars traveled back home with the returning soldiers.
It's almost like the Holy Land becomes a laboratory for castle design.
In the late 12th century, the idea of building two concentric defensive walls arrived in northern Europe. Dover Castle is sometimes called the key to England. Built by Henry II, it was the most expensive, most heavily defended fortress in the kingdom.
Dover Castle was an immense tower protected by a very distinctive curtain wall which had towers all the way along it. And the key thing about Dover Castle was the heavily defended entranceway.
At the heart of the castle was a giant keep with walls up to 20 foot thick. Its outer wall incorporated 14 rectangular towers set on projecting plinths, as well as a tower with firing platforms and multiple narrow windows for archers and crossbowmen. It's believed that the crossbow had only recently arrived in England with the Battle of Hastings. Though not a great weapon on the battlefield, it proved a game changer for castle defense.
Crossbows are probably the most important weapon in a siege situation because they are so deadly. They are able to pick off a well-armed mounted knight because of their range and penetrative power.
With the bow and arrow, you are basically having to use your strength to pull the bow back, but the crossbow had this added feature where you could stand there waiting till the optimal moment to pull the trigger and release the arrow.
The defense of Dover Castle relied on surveillance and the skill of crossbow snipers, hidden behind narrow arrow slits to attack any approaching enemy.
For decades, I've taught you everything I know. How to safely build a fire, and how to control the flames. But I can only teach wildfire prevention. Only you can prevent wildfires. For decades, I've taught you everything I know. But only you can prevent wildfires.
This is the time for bold, decisive action.
It's a race against time.
Give users a way of showing their support for a post with one click. And it forever altered the way in which we perceive the world.
Modern sniper weapons are similarly engineered for long-range accuracy, reducing the enemy's combat ability by neutralizing high-value targets.
If you know about snipers, you know about their accuracy, then the knowledge that they might be positioned in the war zone around you would be paralyzing. There's no sound, there's no warning, just suddenly the hit, and your comrade is killed.
Sudden death was something all too familiar to those attacking castles, but castle technology continued to evolve. In the final decades of the 13th century, a new battlefront opened up when successive English kings turned their attention to the conquest of Wales. It was an opportunity to combine the accumulated engineering ideas of the last 150 years. to create the ultimate super castle.
So, the great Welsh castles of the 13th century are a sort of zenith in castle building design.
Wales is famous for arguably having more castles per square mile than any other part of Europe.
During the reign of King Henry III, one of the most powerful and ambitious barons in the land was Gilbert de Clare. He was tasked with preventing South Wales falling into the hands of the Welsh leader, Llewellyn ap Gruffydd, who controlled most of Wales. De Clare decided the key to military domination of the region would be the construction of a giant castle. It would be a completely new kind of structure, and it would be built at the mouth of the Ramney Valley, in a town named Caerphilly. Construction began in 1268. So what was so special about Gilbert's castle? Right from the beginning, Caerphilly changed the rules of medieval engineering.
It's made up of a series of walls and gateways and towers, and each of those gateways has portcullises, and each of them is defensible in its own right.
It represented a huge leap forward in defensive capabilities.
You've got the capacity to sustain multiple different attacks and to ensure that the castle never completely falls into the hands of those who are besieging.
So what were the challenges faced by potential attackers?
The main castle sits on an island in the middle of a moat, and that moat is retained by a north and south bank, but it's to the east where you have a fortified dam with gatehouses.
Unlike many castles, Caerphilly's moat couldn't easily be drained, so tunneling under its walls was impossible. It may seem that moats are a thing of the past, but in fact they're a defensive design classic still in use today.
The moat is such a successful means of security that even the US Embassy in London, with its state-of-the-art design, incorporates a moat.
The Embassy is central London's first new moated building since the medieval era. Intended as a defense against terror attack, it's said to be 8 feet deep and wide enough to swallow any truck bomb charging towards the building. So given its highly effective moat system, was there any way an attacker could breach Caerphilly's walls?
With the sheer amount of stonework you've got there, the sheer size of it, you've got walls within walls, walls studded with towers, 7 gatehouses, all of those things on top of one another. It comes very close to being an impregnable fortress.
I think only a madman would want to take on something like Caerphilly. The whole point of the construction of Caerphilly in the first place is simply to say, don't even think about it.
But within a century of Caerphilly's completion, a new weapon arrived on the battlefield. Its incredible destructive power would signal the beginning of the end for the super castle.
Mom's in the doghouse again, huh?
Yep, she sure is.
I cheated on my math test. And that got us into crypto. We're down, but we're gonna rally.
You know, we're gigillionaires now. Wi-Fi works great everywhere, not just the doghouse.
Roger.
Not you too, Beth. Okay, we're all going to the doghouse.
Expand your Wi-Fi footprint. AT&T has the nation's fastest wireless and internet network. Now we're plans starting at $34 a month.
2-8. Thank you for calling the Bombas Comfort Line. Bombas is socks, slippers, tees, and underwear. Press 1 to run in Bombas, 2 to sleep in Bombas, 3 to pet a llama in Bombas. And with every purchase, 1 is donated. Bombas. Visit bombas.com and get 20% off your first order.
Continue from taxiway with uniform 1 in 200 meters. Turn left.
You need some help?
Your tow chains are a little loose. Could spark a wildfire. I could show you how to secure them properly if you'd like.
Turn left on taxiway with uniform.
Thanks a lot.
Anytime. You should check out SmokeyBear.com. They've got a bunch of tips on wildfire prevention.
only you
Turn right
can
on
prevent
taxiway
wildfires. For decades, I've taught you everything I know. But only you can prevent
Continue
wildfires.
on taxiway Bravo.
Hedy Lamarr was sitting at a piano next to George Antile. They were creating something with the potential to change the course of the world.
Sea slugs.
Coffee, ketamine,
Sexual pleasure.
cuteness,
Food. Kelp Forest. Woodstock. Baseball.
tennis,
Firefighting. Super subs.
fast radio bursts, solar sailing.
Throughout history, the invention of new ways to kill or destroy has abruptly changed the course of wars. In May 1945, the Second World War came to an end in Europe with the surrender of German forces. However, in the Pacific, the fight with Japan was still raging. But one of the deadliest engineering breakthroughs of all time was about to emerge.
Continue on taxiway Bravo.
Codenamed the Manhattan Project, this was the top-secret American-led effort to develop a functional atomic weapon. And in August 1945, the devastating power of this new technology was made apparent when bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Within days, Japan surrendered. The engineering development that finally brought the medieval super castle down to Earth also turned out to be something explosive.
The arrival of the cannon fundamentally changed the role of the castle because those castle walls could not be protected from cannon fire.
A cannon is very effective because you've got more power and you can direct the payload more accurately. So you can essentially hit your target with greater firepower and cause more damage accurately.
The cannon consists of a strong metal tube with a plug at one end. A small hole for a fuse is drilled through the barrel. Gunpowder is pushed down into the tube, then a solid ball is inserted so that gunpowder and ball are pressed against the plugged end. A fuse in the small hole is then lit to ignite the gunpowder. The resulting explosion shoots the ball out of the tube at high speed towards the target. The damage is done by the sheer power of the blunt force impact. To combat the cannon, castle design changed. Walls were no longer built tall but thick and squat. Many were built of earth, reinforced with stone to better absorb cannon shot.
Turn left.
Castles were no longer the places of refuge and safety they once had been.
Turn left.
So from the 15th century onwards, castles begin to experience a change in purpose and a change in design. And partly that's because models of warfare change. It becomes harder and harder and harder to defend castles against improved forms of attack.
Castles gradually evolved from vital military defensive structures to symbols of power, pomp, and self-promotion. Developments in engineering now focused not so much on improving defenses as improving the architecture, accommodation, and comfort.
So what one sees is an evolution from the castle into the manor house, into the royal palace, into things that we much more obviously associate with courtly life, with aristocratic life.
Grand old castles like the famous Prague Castle became centers of government, or royal residences, such as Windsor.
Turn left on taxiway
Even
Bravo.
today, the super-rich still enjoy building castles, with varying degrees of irony. Sadly, war itself has not been banished to the past. Defense of citizens, property, and nations remains vital. And now it's even closer to home.
War is no longer confined to some sort of far distant battlefield. It's all around us, all the time. We're increasingly living in an age of digital warfare.
Battle lines are now drawn in cyberspace, and the need for defense remains every bit as important as it was centuries ago.
In this digital modern age, our most valuable resource is information and data.
So the firewall on your computer acts rather like a curtain wall around a medieval castle.
And just like in the medieval times, people are constantly trying to attack and steal the valuable resource behind that wall.
Castles were once the most powerful military bases in the Western world, the products of breathtaking feats of medieval engineering, dominating the European landscape throughout the Middle Ages. New weapons were created to attempt their capture, or to bring them crashing down. In turn, other engineers developed new defensive systems to thwart whatever was thrown at them. Castles became symbols of power and places of rebellion. Ultimately, super castles couldn't compete with a form of firepower that could cause destruction with one blast. But thanks to the robust engineering behind their construction, many medieval castles are still with us today. They're now big business, allowing visitors to step back in time and marvel at the engineering prowess of a bygone age.
I think there is something that speaks very immediately and directly to us from childhood onwards about living in a castle or defending a castle or besieging a castle. So for me, there's no quicker route back to the Middle Ages, that vanished world, than there is to go and visit a castle.
Now on Bravo. In 300 meters, destination straight ahead.
We are surrounded by extraordinary feats of engineering, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Without engineering, there'd be no modern world.
Gigantic cities,
Destination on your left. You have arrived at
amazing
your
infrastructure,
destination. Progressive taxi completed.
and ingenious inventions.
Engineering is the key to turn dreams into reality.
To reach these dizzying heights, today's technology relies on breakthroughs made by ancient engineers.
It's mind-boggling how they did this.
How did early civilizations build on such a scale?
They raised the bar for construction in a way that no one thought possible.
The sheer engineering ability is in itself impressive.
By defying the known laws of physics and daring to dream big, they constructed wonders of the world, from gigantic pyramids to awe-inspiring temples and mighty fortresses, all with the simplest of tools.
I cannot imagine the skills people will have needed to build like this.
Now, it's possible to unearth the secrets of the first engineers.
They managed to construct edifices that have survived the ravages of time.
And reveal how their genius laid the foundations for everything we build today. In the modern world, structures dedicated to God still dominate city skylines. Built with no expense spared by all the world's major religions across the globe.
They are a feat of engineering. They are images of heaven.
Amazing mosques, temples, synagogues, and churches. Houses of the holy.
The impact they were designed to have is utter awe and wonder.
But these white-hot modern wonders rely upon earlier breakthroughs. The engineers who constructed them using knowledge and skills built up over thousands of years. Lessons, Part 1. Ancient engineers battled deadly collapses, earthquakes, fire and warfare to create amazing devotional buildings in honor of their gods. Building for God reached a high point in the Middle Ages when a new engineering movement emerged, changing the rules forever. It aimed to use engineering and architecture to create a glimpse of heaven on Earth.
This parking is too small for your aircraft.
And it led to the creation of some of the most beautiful and spectacular buildings ever seen. Gothic cathedrals.
Gothic cathedrals are not only the most spectacular buildings of their age, I think they're among the most spectacular buildings of all time.
They are symbols of our civilization. They are symbols of human achievement. We've never really seen anything like it again.
Taking centuries to build, reaching soaring heights. They feature intricate walls, ceilings of solid stone, carved like spider silk, and vast stained glass windows seeming to float in midair.
When they go in, people's jaws hit the floor, your eyes go up to the roof. I actually think your heels might come off the ground a bit as you're transported up to the heavens.
You are taken out of the everyday world and you encounter something of the divine.
The construction of Europe's Gothic cathedrals was one of the pinnacles of human achievement.
We needed an engineering revolution in design to be able to create that very characteristic Gothic style.
These buildings have endured as lasting symbols of their age.
To this day, Gothic cathedrals are one of the most outstanding engineering achievements of all time.
One of the most iconic is Notre Dame. Built in the heart of medieval Paris, many believe it's one of the crowning achievements of the Gothic movement.
Thrive Cosmetics Brilliant Eye Brightener is your "of course I got 9 hours of sleep" secret. This buildable cream-to-powder formula effortlessly illuminates and brightens your best features. Available in a variety of shades. Use it as an eyeliner, eyeshadow, or below your brow for an instant eye lift. Non-irritating, 100% vegan, cruelty-free, and packed with antioxidants that leave you with an all-day glow. No wonder it's sold every 3 seconds. Plus, for every product you purchase, we donate to help communities thrive. Join our movement today at thrivecosmetics.com.
Wait, use the shovel and bucket of water, remember? Drown, stir, drown, feel.
Where'd you learn that?
SmokeyBear.com. Don't want to start a wildfire, right?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner!
Here we go.
Excellent. Soccer is fun. Yeah, I saw you guys out there. We're the family.
Take it!
Mainly constructed between 1163 and 1250, it set out to surpass all cathedrals that had gone before, to push the technology of the day to its limits, taking great risks, and completely reinventing how a church could look.
There was this challenge of massive construction that would be naturally heavy, but then introducing elements that made them feel like they were lighter than air.
How could it be done?
How do you build high? How do you stop the walls falling down? How do you stop the roof falling down?
The solutions arrived at in Notre Dame were world-changing, and they've stood the test of time. Innovations built into the fabric of the cathedral were copied again and again in structures across Europe and beyond. So what are the engineering secrets that made these spectacular new marvels a reality? To create Gothic, medieval architects would need to rewrite the rulebook and challenge engineering principles laid down in the earliest churches. These simple structures had their roots in a building from the pre-Christian world, the Roman Basilica.
The basilican form is not a religious building in origins at all. It's a legal building or a law court.
A basilica was always a predictable rectangular-shaped building. It would have a nave and 2 or more aisles at each side, a high roof vaulted with a half dome, and a raised tribunal that Roman tribunes would have stood upon. Many of the features that would be found in the cathedrals and churches that would follow.
Essentially, the Gothic cathedral did originate from the Roman basilica. From there, we add transepts, and then we'll add towers. So it all evolves throughout the next 200, 300, 400 years.
Basilicas, like the cathedrals that came after them, were usually built in the very heart of a town or city. Prestige buildings.
What happens is that these basilicas are taken over by the church. The basilica form is then reproduced again and again and again in early churches.
In the 4th century, dramatic events in Rome would speed up the transition from basilica to church. Inspired by a series of religious dreams and visions, the Emperor Constantine made Christianity legal. 10 years later, it became the official religion of the Roman Empire. By the 6th century, the Western Roman Empire had fallen. What survived lay in the East. It came to be known as the Byzantine Empire, and it straddled Europe and Asia. Its capital was Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire was the most important economic, cultural, and military power in Europe, leading the world in mathematics and engineering. In 532, the new emperor, Justinian, wanted to signal his prestige with a spectacular Christian church. It would be known as the Hagia Sophia, or Holy Wisdom. Justinian imagined a vast interior, topped by a huge and dazzling dome. And that presented a major engineering challenge.
They wouldn't have had any idea whether that building would have worked, because there's nothing else like it. They're stepping off into the unknown.
Could such an audacious design be made a reality? For those charged with building it, the pressures would have been immense.
I can imagine the construction site of the Hagia Sophia was incredibly stressful because you were embarking on the unknown.
With a planned height of 183 feet and a footprint of nearly 65,000 square feet, the Hagia Sophia would be a huge building.
2 things happen when you increase the height of a building. One of them is that you expose the building to a lot more wind force. The other thing is the building itself weighs more, and that increases the loads on the foundations that are underneath.
workers would need to dig deep foundations into thick bedrock with limited tools. Today, mechanical excavators dig foundations, which are then reinforced with concrete. In 2014, the Wilshire Grand Center in Los Angeles took foundation construction to a whole new level. It required a single gargantuan slab of concrete, sufficiently robust to stabilize the building in an earthquake. Calling for a lot of concrete to be poured in one go. Engineers choreographed 2,000 truckloads of concrete, pouring continuously for 20 hours, breaking the world record at the time for the largest uninterrupted pour. When completed, the foundations were 18 feet deep and weighed a mighty 84 million pounds. They support the tallest building in Los Angeles,